They called her Unteachable, but a quiet cowboy discovered her gift. Emma was a quiet girl who lived in the small town of Willow Creek, a place where everyone knew each other. And life moved slowly, like the river that cut through the fields. From the moment she could remember, Emma had always felt a little different from the other children. While her classmates could easily follow lessons at school, remember what the teacher said, and answer questions quickly, Emma often felt lost. Words on the page seemed to dance and jumbled together. Numbers twisted themselves, and instructions that seemed simple to everyone else made her feel anxious and frustrated. At home, Emma's family tried to help, but even they sometimes sighed when she struggled. Her parents loved her, of course, but they were practical people who believed in doing things the way they had always been done. They had no idea that Emma had a different way of seeing the world, one that did not fit neatly into books or school assignments. Her older brother often teased her gently, and sometimes her younger cousin would outsmart her in games that should have been easy for Emma. It was in these moments that she first began to hide, learning to shrink into herself and avoid attention because every mistake felt like proof to the world that she was unteachable. At school, things were not much easier. Teachers would scowl when she failed to follow directions exactly, expecting her to repeat tasks she didn't understand. They didn't realize that Emma was not unwilling to learn. She simply needed to experience things in her own way. She tried, again and again, but the frustration built until she stopped trying in front of others, retreating into a world of quiet observation. Her classmates were quick to judge, whispering behind her back, calling her names and treating her as if she were less capable. It hurt, but Emma was used to it by now. She had learned that sometimes it was safer to watch and listen rather than speak up and risk more ridicule. Despite the struggles at school and the judgment from others, Emma had a secret. She noticed things. She noticed the way sunlight fell on the barn at different times of day, the way a horse's ears twitched before it moved, the rhythm of the river when it flowed over rocks. She observed the smallest details in nature, the way ants worked together to carry leaves, the way a plant's leaves turned toward the sun, the soft sound of rain hitting the soil. These things fascinated her, and she found a strange kind of peace in watching them. While others might see a mistake or a slow learner, Emma's mind was quietly building connections, patterns, and understanding in ways that nobody else could see. Emma's love for animals was where her gift first began to show. She spent hours at the edge of her family's small farm watching the horses in the paddock. Some people rode horses, some fed them, but Emma felt as if she could sense what they were thinking. A horse that was restless or nervous, one that would refuse to eat or shy away from a task, seemed to communicate with her in a language nobody else understood. She could stand near a foal, calm it with gentle movements and soft whispers, and feel when it was ready to take its first steps. To everyone else, it seemed like luck or coincidence, but Emma knew she was noticing things deeply, in ways that were quiet and patient, rather than loud and obvious. Even though her family did not fully understand her abilities, Emma found small ways to nurture them. She carried a notebook everywhere she went, sketching the movements of animals, writing down her observations about the weather, the plants, and the way her townspeople behaved. She wrote notes to herself about things she wanted to try, like helping a horse learn to follow commands, or observing the patterns of clouds before a storm. These sketches and notes were private treasures, her own way of learning and understanding the world, far beyond what her teachers and classmates could see. Emma's quiet nature meant that she was often alone. But she did not mind. She preferred it that way. Alone, she could explore her thoughts freely. She could wander through the fields, touch the rough bark of trees, listen to the whisper of the wind, and watch animals without pressure. Each day, she learned a little more about the world around her. Even if the school called her unteachable, she learned about patience, observation, and empathy, lessons that no classroom could provide. Some children her age spent their time chasing games or competing in sports, but Emma spent her time asking questions of the world. She wondered why horses behaved differently under different conditions, why some plants thrived while others withered, and why people often misunderstood each other. She asked questions quietly, never out loud in class, but always in her mind, trying to make sense of the pattern she observed. It was a lonely path, but it was also a path that would eventually reveal something extraordinary about her. One day, Emma was at the edge of the creek near her home, watching a mother horse guide her foal through shallow water. The foal stumbled repeatedly, unsure of where to step, and the mother nudged it gently, encouraging it to keep moving. Emma sat quietly, her eyes following every motion, her hands poised to reach out if needed. She noticed how the foal's ears twitched when it sensed danger, how its small legs struggled to balance, and how the mother's tail swished in rhythm with the foal's movements. She realized she could anticipate what the foal would do next, how it would move, and when it needed comfort. No one had ever asked her to notice such details before, but here, in this quiet moment, she felt her abilities bloom. Despite the beauty she found in these moments, Emma still carried the burden of being misunderstood. Teachers would ask questions she couldn't answer in the expected way, friends would leave her out of games or tease her for mistakes, and even adults occasionally assumed she was not trying hard enough. But Emma began to notice a subtle pattern. While she struggled with traditional learning, she excelled in understanding life in motion, in reading the world rather than memorizing it. She began to understand that her mind was different, not wrong. This realization gave her a quiet strength. Even though others saw failure, Emma saw learning in a different form. She realized that the world was larger than the classroom, that there were places where her talents could shine, even if they were invisible to those around her. She began to feel a spark of hope, a tiny flame that would grow stronger in the days to come. Emma understood that patience, observation, and care could lead to results that books and tests could not measure. And so, life in Willow Creek continued. Emma remained quiet, observant, and often lonely, but she was learning in her own way. She learned from the horses, the plants, the river, and even the rhythm of the town itself. She learned that mistakes were not failures, but lessons, and she learned that her mind, though misunderstood, was capable of seeing things others could not. Little did she know, someone was about to arrive in Willow Creek who would see her potential. Someone who would help her discover that being unteachable did not mean being incapable. Her gift was quietly growing, waiting for the right moment and the right person to be recognized. Emma's story in this first part is one of quiet struggle, observation, and hidden brilliance. It is a story of a girl who seemed ordinary to the world, but who was learning extraordinary lessons in patience, empathy, and understanding. Her gift was not visible in grades or schoolwork. It was visible in the small, subtle ways she connected with life itself. And though she did not yet know it, this gift would soon change not only her own life, but also the lives of those around her. Summer arrived in Willow Creek with a warm golden light that filled the fields and warmed the soil beneath the trees. Emma had spent the past year quietly observing life around her, growing more confident in her private skills, though still unseen by most of the adults in her town. She had come to accept that the world did not understand her the way she understood it, and she had grown comfortable with her quiet routines, her notebooks, her sketches, and her patient observations of the horses and other animals on her family's farm. One morning, a new figure appeared on the horizon. A horse-drawn wagon rumbled down the dirt road toward the creek, and Emma noticed a man walking alongside it. He was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing worn jeans and a hat that shaded his eyes. He moved slowly, with deliberate steps, observing everything around him with a calm and steady gaze. This was Luke, a quiet cowboy who had come to Willow Creek to work on the ranch on the edge of town. He was not loud or flashy like other men who sometimes passed through, and he seemed to notice details that others ignored. Emma first saw him from a distance as he walked near the horses in the paddock. She was sitting on a fence post, watching a young colt learning to balance on its wobbly legs. The colt stumbled and nearly fell, but Emma's careful attention and gentle voice guided it back. Luke stopped in his tracks. Unlike the other ranch hands who might have rushed forward shouting instructions, he simply watched, curious. There was something unusual about the girl sitting quietly on the fence. He could see how the colt responded to her, how it seemed to trust her instinctively. Over the next few days, Luke quietly observed Emma as she worked with the animals. She did not demand their attention. She moved calmly, patiently, and the horses responded to her presence. Luke had worked with many animals in his life, and he knew that true understanding was rare. Most people tried to force obedience through harsh commands or strict routines. Emma's way was different. She seemed to feel the animals' emotions, to anticipate their movements, and to respond with gentle guidance rather than control. Luke was fascinated. and he could not take his eyes off her as she guided the foal through the paddock without ever raising her voice. One afternoon, Luke decided to approach her. Emma tensed slightly, expecting the usual criticism or lecture from adults in her life. But Luke's presence was different. He did not criticize, nor did he question her methods. Instead, he simply said, "You have a way with them. How do you do it?" His voice was soft, patient, and curious rather than judgmental. Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. No adult had ever asked her that before, at least not sincerely. Most people told her what she could not do. Luke was asking what she could. Emma hesitated, then slowly explained, "I watch them. I notice what they are afraid of and what makes them calm. I try to understand what they are trying to say." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried a sincerity that Luke immediately recognized. He smiled faintly, nodding as if he understood something very important. "That's rare," he said. "Most people never take the time to notice." From that day forward, Luke began to guide Emma in small ways. He did not teach her like a teacher at school would, with drills or tests. Instead, he offered gentle advice and encouragement, letting her learn through experience. He would hand her tools, show her how to groom the horses, and then step back, letting her discover the best way to do things. Sometimes he would ask her what she thought about a horse's behavior or how she would approach a problem. Luke was patient, never rushing her, never judging her mistakes. Slowly, Emma began to feel a spark of confidence she had never felt before. Working with Luke, Emma started to notice things she had not noticed before, despite years of observation. She saw the smallest signals in a horse's body language, a flick of an ear, a shift of weight, a subtle change in breathing. She began to understand why some animals resisted certain commands while others followed instinctively. Luke encouraged her to trust her instincts, to move with the animals rather than against them. For Emma, this was revolutionary. No one had ever treated her as someone who could contribute, let alone teach her in a way that matched her own abilities. The town began to notice subtle changes in Emma as well. She walked taller, her movements were more assured, and her eyes carried a quiet confidence. She no longer avoided attention out of fear. On the rare occasions when a neighbor or classmate commented on her abilities with the animals, Emma would smile politely but focus on her work rather than seeking praise. The lessons Luke was giving her were not about recognition. They were about mastery and understanding, about seeing the world clearly and acting with patience. As the summer days passed, Luke introduced Emma to more complex tasks on the ranch. He let her help care for a mare that was about to give birth, a task that required careful observation, timing, and intuition. Emma watched the mare, noting the subtle signs that others might have missed, the restlessness, the pawing of the ground, the gentle snorting. She prepared the stall carefully, arranging blankets and observing the weather, remembering everything she had learned over the years. When the foal finally arrived, healthy and wobbly, Emma was calm and confident, guiding the mare with quiet hands and soft words. Luke watched from a distance, smiling to himself. He knew Emma had a natural gift, one that could not be taught in books or classrooms. But Emma's growth was not only about the animals. Working alongside Luke taught her lessons about patience, resilience, and trust. She learned that mistakes were part of the process, that even experienced cowboys had to try several times to get things right, and that success often came through observation and quiet persistence rather than force. Luke never pressured her. He allowed her to learn at her own pace, which helped her begin to trust herself for the first time. Even in her personal life, Emma began to change. She spoke more confidently with her parents about her work on the ranch, explaining the observations she had made and the lessons she had learned. Her parents were impressed and surprised, realizing for the first time that Emma had abilities that were not measured by school grades or tests. They began to treat her with a new respect, giving her space to explore her skills and trusting her judgment more than ever before. By the end of the summer, Emma had transformed in ways that were visible to everyone around her. She had grown taller in her posture, steadier in her movements, and more thoughtful in her actions. The once unteachable girl was no longer shrinking into herself. Instead, she was learning to shine quietly, guided by a mentor who had recognized her unique abilities. Luke's quiet presence had opened a door to a world Emma had always longed for. A world where her gifts mattered, where she could contribute meaningfully, and where mistakes were part of learning rather than evidence of failure. Emma began to dream of possibilities she had never considered. She imagined herself working with animals, teaching others the lessons she had learned, and using her observations to make life better for the creatures she loved. She realized that being different was not a limitation but a strength. She could see patterns, understand emotions, and respond to situations in ways others could not. For the first time in her life, Emma felt that her differences were not a curse, but a gift waiting to be shared. Luke remained her guide through it all, encouraging her to push gently against the boundaries of her comfort. He never rushed her, never demanded perfection, and never judged her failures. Instead, he celebrated her small victories, asked her thoughtful questions, and allowed her to discover solutions herself. Through his mentorship, Emma began to understand that learning was not about following rules blindly. It was about observing, understanding, and applying knowledge in meaningful ways. The summer ended with a quiet celebration of Emma's growth. She had helped train horses, care for animals, and take on responsibilities that were challenging even for adults. The townspeople began to notice the change. While some were still skeptical, most were impressed by the quiet girl who seemed to have an extraordinary connection with animals. Emma herself felt something she had never felt before: pride, not in grades or recognition, but in her own abilities and the difference she could make. This summer, under the guidance of a quiet cowboy who saw her potential when no one else did, Emma learned a truth that would shape the rest of her life. Being different does not mean being less. Being patient, observant, and gentle can reveal gifts that the world cannot measure with conventional tools. She had discovered that her way of learning, quiet, careful, and connected to life itself, was not only valid but extraordinary. Emma went to bed that last night of summer thinking of the foals, the mares, and the lessons she had learned. She thought of Luke's words. "You notice what others don't. That is your gift. Never forget it." For the first time, she truly believed it. She closed her notebook, the pages filled with sketches, observations, and notes, and drifted into a peaceful sleep. The summer had changed her. She was no longer the girl everyone called unteachable. She was someone who had discovered the power of her own mind, the strength of her patience, and the quiet brilliance of her gift, all waiting for the right moment to shine. As the months passed after that remarkable summer, Emma's confidence grew steadily. She had learned so much from Luke, the quiet cowboy who had believed in her when no one else did. But she was beginning to realize that her abilities went far beyond what anyone in Willow Creek had expected. Every day she observed more, listened more closely, and connected with the animals in ways that seemed almost magical. What others saw as simple behavior she recognized as communication, subtle signals, and emotions. Slowly, Emma's hidden gift was emerging, and the world was beginning to take notice, though she did not seek attention. The first clear sign of her gift came one crisp autumn morning. Emma had been helping Luke check on the horses in the large paddock near the edge of the ranch. One of the older mares, Daisy, had been acting strangely, refusing to eat and pacing in circles. Luke had noticed the behavior but was unsure what was causing it. Emma stepped closer to Daisy, observing her carefully. She watched the way the mare shifted her weight, the trembling of her nostrils, and the tension in her muscles. Emma knelt quietly, speaking in soft tones, letting the mare hear her calm, steady voice. Within minutes, Emma noticed a subtle swelling in the mare's leg that neither Luke nor the other ranch hands had seen. She pointed it out gently, explaining that it could be causing discomfort. Luke examined the leg and realized she was correct. He was astonished at her keen observation. "Emma," he said, "how do you notice things like this? Most adults would never see it." Emma shrugged shyly. "I just pay attention," she replied. It was a simple explanation, but it spoke volumes. Emma had learned to see what others missed, to sense problems before they became obvious, and to act with confidence when others hesitated. Word of Emma's talent began to spread quietly around the ranch. At first, it was only Luke who truly understood her abilities, but soon the ranch hands began to notice the difference she made. Tasks that had been difficult or time-consuming for adults became smoother with Emma's guidance. Horses that had been nervous or stubborn became calm under her care. She could predict a foal's movements, understand a mare's mood, and even sense when a horse was unwell long before symptoms appeared. Her gift was subtle but powerful, and it grew stronger with each passing day. Emma's talent was not limited to animals alone. She began to notice patterns in the world around her that others overlooked. She could predict weather changes by observing the sky, the wind, and the behavior of the animals. She could tell when a plant was about to bloom or when the soil needed attention. Her notebooks, once filled with simple sketches and observations, now contained detailed charts and notes documenting the world in a way that no one else in Willow Creek had thought to do. Luke encouraged her to continue writing and recording her discoveries, knowing that this would help her understand her gift even better. One day, a particularly challenging situation arose. A young colt named Thunder had been brought to the ranch, and he was frightened of humans. He would not eat, refused to be touched, and often bolted at the slightest noise. Luke and the ranch hands had tried everything they knew, from gentle coaxing to training exercises, but nothing worked. Emma watched quietly from a distance, noticing the colt's body language, the tension in his muscles, and the way his ears twitched at every sound. She approached slowly, speaking softly and moving with care. Over the next few hours, she observed his reactions, offering calm reassurance without forcing him to do anything he was not ready for. By evening, Thunder had eaten his first meal and allowed Emma to touch him without fear. Luke stood nearby, his jaw slightly open in amazement. He had trained horses for years, but he had never seen someone connect with them so naturally, so intuitively. "Emma," he said, "you understand them in a way I cannot explain. You have a gift." Emma smiled quietly, feeling a warmth of pride and validation she had never experienced before. She realized that the patience, observation, and empathy she had cultivated over the years were not weaknesses. They were her strength. Emma's growing reputation extended beyond the ranch. Neighbors and townspeople began to hear stories of the girl who could calm any horse, understand their moods, and care for them with extraordinary skill. Some were skeptical, dismissing her abilities as luck or coincidence, but others came to watch her work, curious to see what made her different. Emma, however, remained humble. She never boasted about her skills, preferring to focus on her work and let results speak for themselves. Her success with the animals also gave her new confidence in other areas of life. At school, she began to participate more actively, sharing observations from her notebooks and explaining what she had learned from the ranch. Teachers who had once dismissed her as unteachable began to see her potential. They noticed her ability to connect theory with practice, her thoughtful questions, and her unique perspective on problem-solving. Emma realized that learning did not have to fit a single mold. Her gift allowed her to approach the world differently, and that was something valuable. One afternoon, Luke introduced Emma to the challenge of helping a mare give birth. The mare, Bella, was nervous and uncooperative, and the ranch hands were unsure how to proceed. Emma knelt by Bella's side, watching every movement, every flick of her ears, every shift of weight. She guided Bella with gentle words and careful touches, anticipating her needs and responding before the mare became anxious. Hours passed, and Emma remained calm, focused, and patient. When the foal finally arrived, healthy and strong, Luke clapped his hands in quiet admiration. "You did it, Emma," he said. "You knew exactly what to do." That day marked a turning point. Emma realized that her gift was not just about observing or noticing details. It was about understanding and responding in ways that others could not. She could sense emotions, predict reactions, and guide outcomes with a subtlety that was rare and powerful. Her abilities were becoming more than a secret talent. They were becoming a true skill that could change lives, both human and animal. As Emma's confidence grew, she began to experiment with teaching others. She would show younger children how to approach animals gently, how to observe carefully, and how to respond with patience. She explained things in a way that made sense to them, using examples from her own experiences on the ranch. For the first time, Emma saw herself not only as a learner but also as a teacher. She realized that her abilities could inspire and help others, and this brought her a new sense of purpose. Emma also learned important lessons about empathy and communication. She discovered that every animal and person had their own way of experiencing the world.
By paying attention, listening, and responding with care, she could make connections that others missed. She began to understand that leadership was not about authority or control. It was about understanding, patience, and guidance.
Luke's mentorship had taught her this, but her own experiences confirmed it. Even in quiet moments, Emma continued to observe, learn, and grow. She would walk through the fields at dawn, watching the mist rise over the grass, noticing how the animals moved and interacted. She recorded her observations in notebooks, filled with sketches and notes that documented her growing understanding of the world. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to apply her gift. By the end of the year, Emma had transformed in ways that were visible to everyone. She had become a source of inspiration, not only for the ranch hands and Luke, but also for the community. The girl once called Unteachable had emerged as someone who understood, guided, and cared in ways that no one else could. Her gift, nurtured quietly and patiently, was now undeniable. Emma's story in this part is one of growth, discovery, and the emergence of a hidden gift. It shows that patience, observation, and empathy are powerful tools, and that true talent may go unnoticed until the right moment and the right mentor appear. Emma had learned to trust herself, to value her abilities, and to use her gift to make a difference. She was no longer the shy, overlooked girl of Willow Creek. She was becoming someone extraordinary, quietly and steadily, with a gift that would continue to reveal itself in the days and years to come. By the time spring returned to Willow Creek, Emma had grown into someone unrecognizable to the townspeople who had once called her unteachable. She walked with quiet confidence, her eyes bright with curiosity and her hands steady from months of working with animals on the ranch. Her gift, once hidden and unacknowledged, had blossomed fully, guided by the patience of Luke, the quiet cowboy who had believed in her from the start. Emma had learned that talent was not measured by school tests or grades, but by understanding, patience, and the ability to respond to life's challenges with care and insight. Emma spent her days helping Luke manage the ranch. The horses, foals, and other animals trusted her completely. Even those that had been nervous or aggressive at first responded to her gentle touch and quiet voice. People who came to the ranch could not understand what made her different. They saw results, but they did not see the subtle ways Emma observed, anticipated, and guided each creature. Emma's gift was more than skill, it was intuition, empathy, and an almost magical understanding of life. Her success on the ranch began to ripple outward. Neighbors and townspeople who had doubted her started to see the girl they had underestimated in a new light. Stories spread of her ability to calm horses that no one else could handle, to notice signs of illness before it became serious, and to predict the behavior of animals with uncanny accuracy. Children who once ignored her began to watch and listen, learning from her quiet patience. Teachers, too, started to reconsider their judgments. Some even asked Emma to explain her methods, curious about the way she could achieve results so effortlessly, yet so thoughtfully. Emma, however, never sought attention. She did not perform for praise or approval. She had learned that her gift was valuable for its own sake, and she focused on doing her work well rather than showing off. Yet, despite her humility, her impact was clear. Luke often reminded her that her quiet nature was a strength, not a weakness. "Emma," he said one morning, "you don't need to shout to be heard. People will notice what you do, not just what you say. Your gift speaks for itself." Emma smiled, understanding that he was right. Her actions, patient and careful, had begun to earn respect far beyond her words. One of Emma's proudest moments came when a foal that had been abandoned by its mother arrived at the ranch. The little colt was frightened, weak, and unwilling to trust anyone. The ranch hands tried to feed it and calm it, but the colt would not eat or respond. Emma knelt beside the foal for hours, speaking softly, letting it sniff her hands and feel her presence without pressure. She noticed every tiny movement, every flick of an ear, every quiver in its legs. Slowly, she coaxed the foal to eat, to stand, and eventually to walk. By the end of the day, the colt was calm, alert, and beginning to trust again. Luke watched with pride. "You saved him," he said. "Not just with skill, but with patience and understanding." That's rare. Emma began to realize that her gift was not just about animals. She had learned lessons that could be applied to people as well. Observing carefully, listening patiently, and responding with care could build trust, solve problems, and guide others. She began to help younger children on the ranch who struggled with tasks or felt frustrated. She would teach them gently, showing them step by step, listening to their questions, and encouraging them to try again without fear of failure. The children adored her, not just for her abilities, but for her kindness and patience. At school, Emma's transformation became evident. The teachers who had once dismissed her as unteachable began to notice her unique talents. She participated in class more confidently, connecting lessons to her experiences on the ranch. She explained patterns in animal behavior, observations from nature, and her careful methods for problem solving. Other students began to listen, and some even sought her guidance in understanding difficult topics. Emma's confidence inspired others to recognize that learning could happen in many ways, and that being different did not mean being incapable. Emma's family also began to see her in a new light. Her parents, who had sometimes worried about her struggles at school, now watched with pride as she guided animals, helped children, and shared her observations with others. They realized that her way of learning, quiet and careful, was not a limitation but a gift. Her older brother, who had once teased her gently, now asked for her advice when working with animals or understanding certain patterns on the farm.
Even the townspeople who had doubted her abilities could not ignore the results of her patience and skill. Despite her growing recognition, Emma remained humble.
She continued to observe quietly, to record notes in her notebooks, and to learn from every situation. She knew that her gift required care, attention, and responsibility. She never rushed her work, never forced results, and always respected the creatures and people she interacted with. Luke often reminded her that true talent was not just about being able to do something well. It was about understanding the responsibility that came with it. Emma had embraced this lesson fully. Emma's impact extended beyond the ranch and school. The local community began to seek her guidance for animals that were sick or behaving strangely. Farmers would bring horses, goats, and even cows to the ranch for her advice. People were amazed at how she could notice small details that others overlooked, how she could calm a frightened animal, and how she could anticipate problems before they became serious. Emma's gift, once hidden and misunderstood, had become a source of hope and assistance for the entire town. Her mentorship with Luke continued to play a crucial role in her growth. He remained patient, supportive, and encouraging, always allowing Emma to lead while offering guidance when needed. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and trust. Luke understood her abilities and knew how to nurture them without pressure. Emma, in turn, relied on his wisdom, learning not just about animals but about life, responsibility, and the value of quiet confidence. One day, a visiting veterinarian came to the ranch to consult on a difficult case. The veterinarian had heard about Emma's abilities and was curious to observe her methods. Emma worked quietly, analyzing the animal, noting subtle signs of distress, and suggesting interventions that were precise and effective. The veterinarian was astonished. "I've been working with animals for decades," he said, "and I have never seen someone notice details like you do. You have a gift, and it is extraordinary." Emma blushed but smiled quietly, knowing that her work was not about recognition. It was about helping, understanding, and caring. As time passed, Emma's story spread even further. Newspapers in nearby towns wrote about the girl who could communicate with animals in ways that seemed almost magical. People came to Willow Creek not just to see her work, but to learn from her methods. Emma welcomed them with patience and kindness, sharing her insights without arrogance.
She showed that intelligence and talent could appear in many forms and that success was not always measured by traditional standards. Emma also began to dream of the future.
She thought about how she could help more animals, teach more children, and continue learning herself. She wanted to study veterinary science one day, combining her gift with formal education to make an even greater difference. Her confidence in her own abilities had grown so much that she no longer feared challenges or mistakes. She knew that every situation was an opportunity to observe, learn, and improve. Through it all, Luke remained her mentor, friend, and guide. He had seen Emma's potential long before anyone else, and he continued to provide gentle guidance and encouragement. He reminded her that her gift was rare and precious. and that it came with responsibility. Emma had learned to trust herself, to trust her observations, and to use her talents wisely. Luke's belief in her had been the key that unlocked her confidence, but Emma had cultivated her gift through patience, practice, and quiet determination. By the end of the year, Emma had fully transformed from the shy, overlooked girl who had been called unteachable into a confident, skilled, and respected young woman. She had discovered her gift, nurtured it, and used it to help others. The town of Willow Creek had learned a valuable lesson. True talent is not always obvious, and those who seem different may have extraordinary abilities waiting to be discovered.
Emma had shown that patience, observation, and empathy were just as important as knowledge from books, and that a quiet heart could make a powerful difference in the world. Emma's story concluded not with a single dramatic event, but with a steady, lasting change.
She had gained recognition not through arrogance or loudness, but through her quiet actions, her careful observations, and her unwavering commitment to doing things the right way. She had become a mentor to others, an inspiration to her community, and a guardian for the animals she loved. Looking back, Emma realized that being called unteachable had been a turning point in her life. It had forced her to find her own way of learning, to observe closely, and to trust her instincts. It had given her the patience and humility that allowed her gift to emerge fully. With Luke's guidance and her own determination, she had proven that differences could be strengths and that every individual had unique talents waiting to be discovered.
Emma's story, once a tale of quiet struggle, had become a story of triumph, growth, and inspiration. She had transformed not only herself but also the world around her, showing that understanding, patience, and empathy were gifts that could change lives. The girl once called unteachable had discovered her true potential and had become a living example of how belief, guidance, and self-discovery could reveal hidden brilliance in anyone.